Today's video, I want to go over the Sony 50mm Zeiss f1.4. Now this was a lens I was debating on for months because they also sell a significantly cheaper 55mm Zeiss f1.8. So for this video, instead of making a talking head video, I prefer to make a video actually showing you the footage this lens can produce. Because for me, when I was looking for videos of this lens, there wasn't really much that I seen that actually showed the video side of this lens. It was all just boring talking heads, so I'll just get into some of the things I do like about the lens and some things I don't like about the lens. First off, one thing I noticed right off rip that I don't like about this lens was the autofocus motor noise. To me, they're quite loud. I was listening to these motors compared to my 85 and the 50mm was noticeably louder. Now whenever I'm filming music videos or short films or any other video that's going to require me to replace the audio that's being recorded, then it's not really an issue. But if I was shooting an interview, which I haven't done yet, but I definitely feel like you would hear the autofocus motors, which could be very annoying. Second con for me, well actually second con for some people, not really for me, but I feel it's worth mentioning, is the weight. This lens, and comparing to the 55mm, is heavier, but for me this isn't really a con because I enjoy its weight. I like how it feels, but for some people this could be a deal breaker. The lens itself doesn't feel cheaply made at all. It's not a small lens by no means, but it's also not overly huge, so it's just something to put into consideration if you care about the lens weight. Third con, which ties back to the autofocus, for me, I felt like this lens autofocus was not as fast as my 85mm lens autofocus. It's sometimes when filming, I actually seen that the lens sometimes would struggle to change focus whenever I was switching back and forth from subject to subject. Maybe there's a firmware update for this lens like the 50mm Sony lens had, but I'm not really sure. Now let's get into the pros of this lens. So for me, pro 1 would be this lens has an aperture ring on the lens. Now for some people that might not be a good enough reason to spend the extra couple $100s on this lens, but for me that's something I really did want to have because coming from my Blackmagic cinema camera, most of my lens had aperture rings on them, so me using it for so long, I kind of grew a liking for it. Pro number 2, which is the second reason why I picked up this lens, is it has an f-stop of 1.4, which is really great for low light, especially paired up with the A7S III. Now the 55 has an f1.8, and I really didn't want another f1.8. I really want at least one lens with a low f-stop because my 85 is a 1.8, then I have a Sigma 100 to 400, which I'm going to make a video about that, but that goes up to f5 to 6.3, so I didn't have a f1.4 lens. So for me, that's something I definitely did want. And yeah, I could have gone with a Sigma 50mm lens, but I like to stay with the native Sony lineup. That's just me. Not saying any other third party are bad, because to be honest, there's actually some third parties that are actually better than a native Sony brand, but that's just what I like. That's what I prefer to stay with. Moving on to my third pro for this lens. Now if you're a photographer and not a videographer, well, this pro is for you then, because this lens, in my opinion, is a great choice for photos. I actually went out and did some photo work with this lens and I was well pleased. This lens itself is the reason why I always will love the 50mm focal length. It's not too close and it's not too far, and it's just, the 50 is just my go-to for everything. I just love it so much. Now all in all, besides the couple cons I have with this lens, I really do enjoy this lens a lot. One thing I will add is I have previously first used a 50mm G Master lens, and one thing I will say is better in my opinion is the autofocus. But for me, as of right now, I will keep the Zeiss lens until the day I do decide to upgrade to the G Master. This 50mm lens is expensive, I won't sit here and say otherwise, but when buying this lens, I knew it would be a great one-time investment, knowing it was more expensive because the 50mm focal stays on my camera 90% of the time. It really does. I shot all my music videos with the 50mm, I shoot my photos when I take photos with the 50mm. I just love it. I will say this though, if you're not really a 50mm shooter and you're just thinking about getting one just to have in case you do decide to shoot with a 50mm, I say in my opinion get the 55, even though I really like the 50, only because if you're really not going to use this lens to its full potential, then there's no point in spending all this money on something you will use here and there. Just get the cheaper one in my opinion. But that's it for today's video. Let me know in the comments if you have this lens and what do you like and what do you don't like. Is there anything that I missed, or is there anything that I should add on, or just let me know in the comment section below. I would love to see you guys' opinions. Without further ado, if you're new to the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Abiantu, bonjourni.